I was sitting at the table about to take a bite of my last slice of pizza when her son suddenly hit me with a broomstick. My wife leaned in and whispered, "Next time, am for the throat." Welcome to my YouTube channel, where we dive into real-life stories inspired by Reddit topics about family, friends, and life's challenges. Today, we follow a man who has been manipulated by his wife and stepson for years. After discovering the truth, he decides it's time to take control and escape. Can you relate to his struggle? Stay tuned until the end to see how he handles the fallout and finds freedom. Don't forget to help me reach 1,000 subscribers to keep these stories coming. It was just supposed to be a fresh start, a quiet life on a remote island. How did everything spiral out of control so quickly? When I first moved to Stonebrick Island, I thought I was making the smartest decision of my life. Tired of the noise, the stress, and the endless expectations that came with living in a city, I longed for peace and tranquility. I was looking for more than just a change of scenery. I needed to find a piece of myself again, away from the chaos. I had even convinced my wife, Rachel, that we should sell our city apartment and move to this quiet little cottage just a short boat ride from the mainland. She was skeptical at first, but in the end, the idea of a simpler life appealed to her too. She had a son from her previous marriage, Max, a 16-year-old with a rebellious streak and a love for the island's beauty. I thought, this is a chance for us to really bond. Rachel assured me that Max would warm up to the idea. He was just a teenager, after all, still adjusting to life without his biological father around. The first few months were almost perfect. The island life was peaceful. Max and I would go fishing and take long walks along the shore. He wasn't the most talkative kid, but there were moments when I thought he was starting to see me as a role model, maybe even a father figure. I didn't ask for much. I wasn't his dad, and I knew I had to earn that position. But as time went on, things started to change. Little by little, I noticed him becoming more distant, more defiant. It wasn't just the usual teenage angst, it was something else. Small things started to bother me. Max leaving his things all over the house, talking back to Rachel, and ignoring the house rules. It was typical teenager behavior, I guess, but it felt different, like there was some underlying resentment building up. One evening, after a long day at work, I came home to find only one slice of pizza left in the fridge. My stomach growled. I had been running on fumes all day and hadn't eaten since noon. Rachel was in the kitchen, and Max was on the couch, gaming as usual. I heated up the pizza and sat down at the table to eat when Max suddenly stomped in, looking at me like I had done something wrong. He wasn't angry, he was just cold. "That's my slice," he snapped. His voice hard. I could feel my patience running thin. "I worked a 12-hour shift today, Max. You can grab something else. There's cereal or sandwiches," I replied, trying to keep my cool. He didn't like that answer. "You don't get it, do you?" he sneered. "You're just the guy who came into our lives, thinking you can just take what's mine." Before I could respond, he grabbed a broom and swung it, not at me but toward the pizza. The broom's wooden handle cracked against the back of my head. The world spun. I staggered forward, the pizza flying from my plate as blood began to trickle down the back of my neck. I turned around, disoriented, to see Max standing there, a twisted grin on his face. "Oops, guess I missed the pizza," he said nonchalantly. Rachel rushed in at that moment, but instead of asking if I was okay, her first words were, "Max, what did he do to you?" The shock I felt was overwhelming. I was bleeding from my head, and Rachel didn't even check if I was okay. She only cared about protecting Max. In that instant, I realized something that shattered me. This wasn't a family. This was a group of people who only cared about themselves, and I was the outsider. I didn't want to believe it at first, but that night something in me snapped. It wasn't just the blood. It was everything. After the incident with the broom, I tried my best to convince myself that things would get better. But deep down, I could feel the heaviness pressing on my chest. Every day I woke up to the same familiar faces. I brushed off the cut on my head as if it were just another small injury. Just another thing I could ignore, just another thing to get through. I went to work the next day like nothing had happened, hoping that maybe things would calm down on their own. That time would heal this rift between us. But no matter how hard I tried, no matter how much I told myself that everything would work out, it never did. Things only got worse. Max's behavior was escalating. It started with small, subtle acts of defiance that I dismissed. A few forgotten chores here and there. An eye roll, a sarcastic comment. A whatever thrown at me when I tried to get him to help around the house. Typical teenager stuff, right? I could handle that. At first, I thought it was just a phase. I convinced myself that he was just going through something, that maybe he just needed time to adjust. After all, what did I know about being a father to someone else's child? But then it started getting personal. The insults grew sharper. He began undermining my authority at every turn, challenging my decisions, questioning everything I said. Nothing I did seemed to make him respect me. Not that I expected blind respect, but at least some acknowledgement that I was trying. But it wasn't just the disrespect that cut through me. It was the silence from Rachel. She saw it all. She watched Max treat me like garbage, and she did nothing. She'd look the other way, or worse, she'd say, "Oh, it's just a phase, he's still adjusting." Adjusting? Adjusting to what? Why was I the only one who seemed to be struggling with this? That night, after yet another argument that left me frustrated and emotionally drained, I realized something had to change. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. I couldn't keep living like this, constantly questioning myself, constantly wondering if I was the problem. I was starting to feel like a stranger in my own home, like I was living with people who didn't care about me or my well-being. And it wasn't just Max. It was Rachel too. I had been trying so hard to be patient, to be the good guy, to show them I wasn't like the others. But that night, something inside me cracked. The walls I had been building up in my mind, telling myself I was overreacting, telling myself that I could fix things, started crumbling. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. It felt like I was slowly suffocating in a house where no one gave a damn. And that was when I started looking for answers. I didn't want to, but I had to. I had to know if I was just being overly sensitive, if I was just letting my emotions get the best of me, or if I was being manipulated. For the first time in months, I felt like I needed to take control of my own life. I needed to see the truth, even if it meant opening a door I didn't want to open. I couldn't keep guessing. I started noticing things I had brushed off before. Small signs that pointed to something far more disturbing. Rachel's behavior had changed too. She was always on her phone, texting late into the night, always looking over her shoulder when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Her business account? It was always a mystery. She claimed it was for work, but no one ever saw any evidence of it. I didn't ask questions before because I trusted her. I shouldn't have. I couldn't ignore it any longer. Something was off. One evening, I came back from a trip to the town center to pick up a few things for the house. I was tired, but I felt an unusual sense of urgency. Like something was pulling me to investigate, to dig deeper. As I walked through the door, I saw a piece of paper on the kitchen counter. It wasn't like the other notes we'd leave each other. This one was different. A little crumpled. Like it had been hastily discarded. I picked it up without thinking. It was a text from Rachel to Max. I should have turned away, should have left it where it was. But something inside me urged me to read it. And I did. It wasn't meant for my eyes, but it was there, staring at me in black and white. And when I read it, I felt the world tilt on its axis. Tell him you'll test his limits. Make him snap. That way he'll be the bad guy. We can make our move then. I froze. My heart stopped for a moment as the reality of it all hit me. This wasn't just some random act of defiance from Max. This was calculated. This wasn't a phase, this was manipulation. Rachel wasn't just ignoring Max's behavior, she was actively encouraging it. She wanted me to fail. She wanted me to be the villain in this story. She was using Max as a pawn in a game I hadn't even realized I was playing. The feeling of betrayal hit me like a ton of bricks. My whole body went numb as the weight of what I had just read sank in. How could she do this? How could she want me to fail, to be the bad guy in front of Max? I wasn't asking for perfection, but I was trying. I was trying to be a good husband, a good father to Max. And this is what I got in return? I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. The message was clear. Rachel and Max were in this together. They had been working as a team to undermine me, to break me down, and now I saw the truth. I wasn't just living in a house with strangers, I was living in a house where I was the enemy. I didn't know what to do next. Part of me wanted to confront Rachel right then and there. I wanted to scream, to demand answers. But I knew that wouldn't help. She would deny it, manipulate the situation, turn the tables on me. That's what she did best. No, I couldn't do that. Not yet. Instead, I quietly left the kitchen and walked to my room. I didn't say a word. The silence in the house was deafening. The walls felt like they were closing in on me and I was suffocating. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the weight of everything crashing down on me. I had to make a plan. I couldn't keep living like this. I had to get out, but I had to do it on my own terms. Rachel thought she could control me. She thought I was weak. But she was wrong. I wasn't going to be her puppet anymore. I wasn't going to be anyone's punching bag anymore. I had to fight back, quietly, strategically. The next few days felt like a blur of paranoia and calculation. I was living in a constant state of vigilance, my mind racing at all hours. Every day felt like a delicate balance between playing the role of the dutiful husband and father while secretly planning my escape. I couldn't let them know. I couldn't let Rachel and Max see through the mask I was wearing. The clock was ticking, and I needed to be meticulous. The first thing I did was take a closer look at everything, the finances, the communication, everything I could get my hands on. I knew Rachel had been acting strangely, but the depth of her deceit was beyond anything I could have imagined. Every time Rachel and Max went out, whether it was for a shopping trip or just a walk, I'd stay behind, pretending to relax or do chores. But underneath, I was constantly at work. I had to know the full scope of what was happening. I started digging through the documents, carefully going through the bank statements, the receipts, even the credit card bills. What I found made my stomach churn. Rachel had been siphoning money from our joint account, sending large sums to her ex-husband, Tom, who lived in another part of the country. She had always claimed that they were on bad terms, that he was unreliable, and that she had no contact with him anymore. Yet here it was clear as day. Her words were lies. She had been in constant contact with him, sending money regularly. At first, it was a shock, one of those moments where you feel the floor fall out beneath you. But as the hours passed, as I sat there going through the statements one after another, the anger started to rise. I had been a fool. She had been lying to me for months, using me as a financial lifeline while betraying me in the worst way. But I had to stay calm. I couldn't let emotion cloud my judgment. I needed to be strategic. I needed to make sure that when I left, she couldn't do anything to turn the tables on me. So I kept digging. I went through their phones, their emails, their social media accounts, everything. I wasn't the type of guy to snoop, but at this point, I was willing to do whatever it took. I had to know everything. I couldn't leave any loose ends. And as I uncovered more, the picture became clearer. I found dozens of texts between Rachel and Tom. Some were casual, small talk about how much they missed each other. Others were more disturbing. They talked about how they could get me to sign over my assets, how they could manipulate me into giving them everything they needed. Rachel wasn't just manipulating Max, she was manipulating me too. She had been using every trick in the book to make me feel guilty, to make me doubt myself. And all along, she had been playing both sides, me and Tom. She was the mastermind behind it all. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. But I couldn't afford to break down. Not yet. Not until I had everything in place. I had spent 3 years building a life with Rachel, and now I was going to tear it all down. But I needed to do it on my terms, and I needed to do it quietly. If I made a scene, if I let them know what I knew, I would lose the upper hand. Rachel would turn it all on me, manipulate the situation, and I would look like the villain. No, I couldn't let that happen. I knew the time had come to leave. But it couldn't be just a simple walk out the door situation. It had to be calculated. They needed to think everything was normal. They needed to believe that I was still the same. Still the good guy in their eyes, while I was secretly preparing for the biggest move of my life. I couldn't just pack up and leave. I had to make sure that everything was in place. That I had all the evidence I needed to ensure that they paid for what they had done. I spent the next few days quietly working on my exit strategy. I was methodical, precise, and above all, patient. The first part of the plan was simple: gather all the evidence I could. I made copies of the bank statements, took screenshots of the texts between Rachel and Tom, and backed up all the emails that proved Rachel had been lying to me. I even recorded some of the conversations that had taken place between her and Max, things they had said when they thought I wasn't listening. I knew that once I left, I couldn't afford to leave anything to chance. I needed everything in black and white. Next, I focused on the financials. I knew Rachel would be watching the accounts, so I had to act fast. I opened a separate bank account under a different name and transferred all my funds into it. I took every penny I had worked for, every dollar that was mine, and moved it out of our joint account. I couldn't trust her anymore. I couldn't risk her draining me dry. At the same time, I started quietly moving my things out. I didn't take everything at once, of course. That would have been too obvious. But I started with the things that were important to me, my personal belongings, my documents, my tools. Anything that I could take without raising suspicion. Little by little, I made the space around me feel more and more empty. It was a slow process, but I was careful. Every move I made was deliberate. I wasn't going to give them a chance to see me coming. But even as I was setting my plan in motion, there were moments when doubt crept in. There were moments when I questioned if I was doing the right thing. I'd look at Rachel and Max and wonder how it had all gone so wrong. How had I missed all the signs? But then I'd think back to the messages I had found, to the lies Rachel had told, to the way she had manipulated me, and I knew I was doing the right thing. I wasn't going to let them keep doing this to me. The hardest part was the emotional toll. Every day, I had to pretend that everything was fine. Every day. I had to look at Rachel and Max and act like I wasn't planning my escape, like I wasn't already checking out of this toxic situation. The emotional weight of it was exhausting. But I had to keep going. I couldn't let them win. Not this time. As the days passed, the pieces began to fall into place. I made sure to keep a low profile, making sure that every time Rachel and Max left the house, I had a chance to work on my plan undisturbed. I was getting closer step by step. I had all the evidence I needed. I had secured my financial future, and I had prepared my exit. But I wasn't done yet. I still had one final step to take, one final, quiet act of rebellion that would ensure Rachel couldn't turn the tables on me once I was gone. I couldn't just leave and disappear without a trace. I had to make sure they knew exactly why I was leaving. I had to leave them with no doubts about what they had done to me. So I started writing the letter that would change everything. Hey, are you finding the story interesting so far? If you are, make sure to subscribe to the channel so we can continue the adventure together. The best part is just ahead. The island was supposed to be my escape, but now it was my battleground. The world thought I was weak, but they had no idea what was coming. The week that followed was like a blur of sharp focus. Every minute I spent in that house felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. One wrong move and everything would come crashing down. Rachel and Max were oblivious, completely unaware that their world was about to crumble. They thought everything was fine. Life was still as it had been for the past few months, albeit a little more tense. Max continued his usual routine of avoiding me, mocking me from a distance, while Rachel carried on as if nothing had changed. She believed I was still the same man she had tricked into this mess. But little did they know I had already begun the process of dismantling my life from within. I opened a new bank account, one that Rachel wouldn't have access to. It was under a fake name, a name that no one in the house would recognize. Every time I thought about the security of this plan, a small part of me felt relief. But another part, the part that had been beaten down by months of manipulation, was anxious. I transferred every last cent of my money into that account, moving it far away from Rachel's prying hands. She had been siphoning funds from our joint account, so now it was my turn to reclaim what was mine. Changing all my passwords was next. Rachel had always pried into my personal things, emails, social media accounts, even my phone messages. It was a small thing, but it felt like I was slowly reclaiming control over my own life. I couldn't take back the time I had lost with her, but I could certainly stop her from digging into every little detail of my existence. I changed everything: my phone passcode, my computer passwords, my work accounts. Every layer of privacy I had left, I locked it down. But none of this was as simple as just transferring money and changing passwords. There was more. I had to document everything. The texts, the photos, the voice memos, all of it. I had to make sure that once I left, they couldn't turn the tables on me. I wasn't just leaving my wife and stepson, I was taking back my life. And I couldn't let them ruin me on their way out. One night, after I had finished recording yet another damning voicemail from Rachel, I sat in silence. The house was still, almost eerily quiet. Max was holed up in his room, doing whatever he did in there, and Rachel was asleep, or at least pretending to be. I sat on the couch, looking at the empty space around me. The house that had once felt like home, now a prison. The walls felt like they were closing in. I wasn't going to let them win. I had been waiting for this moment for weeks now, and it was finally here. Rachel had announced rather nonchalantly that she was taking Max to see his aunt on the mainland for the weekend. A trip to get away. A change of scenery for the both of them, she'd said. To me, it sounded like the perfect opportunity. It was my chance to execute the final steps of my plan. Rachel would be gone. Max would be gone. And I could finally move my things out without them being the wiser. But even with all the pieces falling into place, my heart was racing. The thought of actually going through with this, leaving everything behind, leaving Rachel behind, was terrifying. I had spent 3 years with her. She was the mother of Max, the woman I had built a life with, and yet, she had betrayed me. She had manipulated me for months, and now I was walking away from it all. I took a deep breath and reminded myself, I wasn't just running away. I was taking back control. The night before their departure, I took the first step. I began packing my things. It wasn't much, just the essentials. The things I had earned and loved. I wasn't going to take everything. There was no reason to drag it all out. I took only what was mine, things I could live with. Things I could keep as reminders of the person I used to be. My books, my work materials, my tools, and a few personal items. I made sure not to disturb anything in the house that might raise suspicion. Rachel would think I was just going about my usual routine. I rented a truck for the next morning. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small moving truck that I could drive without drawing attention. I had arranged for it to be ready at a nearby storage facility. It felt surreal, hauling my life into that truck. As I loaded the boxes, there was a strange sense of relief mixed with regret. I couldn't help but think of what might have been of the life I had wanted. But I knew I had made the right decision. I had given Rachel a chance to be honest with me, to work with me, but she had chosen this path, one of manipulation and deceit. The truck was loaded, and I still had a few more steps to take. I wasn't just going to leave without leaving something behind, without making sure Rachel and Max knew exactly why I was doing this. It wasn't just about me walking away. It was about ensuring they understood that I wasn't the villain in this story. I had already gathered everything: texts, photos, bank documents, and screenshots of the conversations between Rachel and Tom. I made a copy of everything, placing it in a neat folder. I wasn't leaving without leaving them a clear picture of their own guilt. The folder was placed on the kitchen counter, the same counter where Rachel had placed so many of her lies over the years. It felt symbolic, like the final piece of the puzzle. I didn't leave a note or any personal message. There was no point in explaining myself to someone who would never understand. But that folder, with all the damning evidence, would speak louder than words. The next morning, as Rachel and Max prepared for their trip, I stayed quiet. They didn't notice the empty spaces in the house, the absence of my things. I made sure to keep my face neutral, my emotions hidden. I didn't want them to know. Not yet. As they left, I drove the truck to the storage facility, where I unloaded everything into a small apartment I had rented a few weeks before. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It was quiet. It was mine. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. I didn't return to the house. I didn't look back. They were gone for the weekend, and I would make sure that by the time they returned, nothing would be the same. Rachel had thought I was weak. She had thought I would be the one to crumble under the pressure. But she was wrong. I wasn't weak. I was just waiting for the right moment to strike. And that moment had arrived. I'm not going back. I'm finally free. But Rachel still thinks she's won. She has no idea what's coming next. When Rachel came home, everything was gone. My things, my money, everything. The house, the place I had once called home, was empty. There was no trace of me left, just her things and Max's belongings scattered across the living room like they were never meant to be part of my life. It was a haunting sight. One that I thought would feel liberating, but instead it felt like I was leaving behind a chapter one couldn't fully escape. I couldn't help but wonder what she would think when she saw it all. Would she panic? Would she be relieved that I was finally gone? Or would she feel something else entirely: guilt, anger, betrayal? I wasn't sure, but I had made up my mind. There was no turning back now. I didn't respond to her frantic calls or messages. I knew Rachel well enough to understand that she would try to manipulate me once again, to turn the situation to her advantage. She might even try to twist it, paint me as the villain, make me out to be the one who left her hanging. I had already seen her do it too many times before. But this time I was prepared. This time I was in control. I had spent weeks preparing for this day. I wasn't going to leave quietly to slink away into the shadows. I had been manipulated for too long. I had been deceived, used, and discarded like a tool. No more. I was done being a pawn in her game. It was time for me to take back what was mine. So, I sent every last piece of evidence to her ex-husband, Tom. The texts, the bank statements, the photos, the screenshots of conversations that proved everything she had done behind my back. She had been lying to me, manipulating me for months, and I had the proof to show the world what kind of person she really was. It wasn't just about getting away from her anymore. It was about justice. I didn't want revenge. That wasn't the goal. Revenge would have kept me tied to her, kept me stuck in the past. What I wanted was closure. I wanted the truth to be known. To finally show Rachel that her actions had consequences. Next, I contacted the bank. I made sure every fraudulent transaction was reported, every suspicious activity flagged. I didn't care about the legal battles ahead. This wasn't about money, it was about stopping her from ever doing this to someone else. I wasn't going to let her destroy someone else's life the way she had mine. She had taken enough from me already. Then I sent the documents to her workplace. They needed to know about the lies she had been telling them, about the manipulative tactics she had used to get ahead. She wasn't the victim here. She had been the perpetrator. And now it was time for the truth to come to light. I had no doubts she would try to cover her tracks, to explain it all away with some fabricated excuse. But I knew it was only a matter of time before everything unraveled. Days went by and still I didn't hear from Rachel or Max. I knew they couldn't understand why I was doing this. They had never understood. Max had been raised to think the world revolved around him, and Rachel had always manipulated me into thinking that I was the problem. They would never see the situation the way I saw it. To them, I was just a man who walked out on his family, who abandoned them without warning. But to me, I was someone who had been pushed to the edge, someone who had been drained emotionally and mentally. Rachel and Max were going to have to face the consequences. They couldn't keep walking through life pretending that everything would be fine. They couldn't just keep using people to get what they wanted without ever having to pay for their actions. As the days passed, the silence between us grew. I would occasionally check my phone to see messages from Rachel, sometimes frantic, other times accusing. She was still trying to reach me, to get me to come back, to make things right. But it was too late. There was no more room for excuses. There was no more room for her lies. I wasn't going back. I had made my decision, and I was finally free. The last I heard, Rachel was struggling. Her job was on the line. She had been caught lying on official documents, and now her company was investigating her. Her reputation, once built on deceit and manipulation, was now in tatters. People were starting to see who she really was, and I knew it was just a matter of time before everything came crashing down. She thought she was invincible. She thought she had one. But she didn't know the real power in this situation wasn't hers. It was mine. As for Max, Tom was now fighting for full custody of him. The lies Rachel had told him, the way she had manipulated his feelings against me, had finally caught up to her. Max was confused, angry, and hurt. He didn't understand why I had left, but in time, he would. I had no doubt that the truth would come out. And when it did, Max would know what had really happened. He would understand why I couldn't stay in a toxic, abusive environment any longer. As for me, I was finally at peace. For the first time in months, I woke up without the weight of constant anxiety pressing down on me. There were no more arguments, no more manipulation. No more walking on eggshells in my own home. I could breathe again. Every morning felt like a fresh start, a chance to live my life on my terms. I could feel the tension in my shoulders loosen. The anxiety that had become so familiar over the years finally starting to fade away. This was my freedom. This was my life. I had taken it back, piece by piece, and now it was mine to live. This story isn't over. I know that. There are still battles ahead. There are still moments when I'll have to face the past, when I'll have to confront the people who betrayed me. But for now, I'm free. For the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe. I can live. And that, in itself, is more than enough. Conclusion. This story was a long journey of manipulation, discovery, and ultimately freedom. From the quiet island life to the shocking betrayal, every step of the way tested my resolve. I'm not a vengeful man, but I've learned that when people show you who they really are, you can't ignore it. This was my story of taking back control piece by piece. What do you think of the story? I'd love to hear your thoughts and feelings, so feel free to leave a comment or share any feedback. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss the next exciting chapter. Thank you for sticking with me through this journey. Your support means the world, and I can't wait to share more stories with you soon.